Anthrax and One Health. First of all, I'd like to wish everybody a happy World Zoonosis Day. Now, today was the first, means today was is also the death anniversary or 100th anniversary of Louis Pasteur's death. And today, only in the year 1885, he administered the first successful rabies vaccine. And this day was hence observed since 2007 as the to commemorate his contribution to the field of zoonotic diseases. So Pasteur also worked to create a vaccine for anthrax. That vaccine has been modified, but we do remember his contribution in the form of World Zoonosis Day, and we are discussing anthrax only today. So what is anthrax? Actually, the word anthrax in a literal terms means coal. It's a common deadly zoonotic disease, as we all know, and the agent is a group A bioterrorism agent. So, being the group A bioterrorism agent or category A bioterrorism agent, it is very hardy and it can spread very easily. It is not inactivated easily by environmental conditions or temperature, and it is caused by Bacillus anthracis. It has got several synonyms like black bane, malignant edema, malignant pustule, and rag picker's disease. It means it has got some occupational predilections like rag pickers. If we throw some garbage containing some infectious material containing Bacillus anthracis and some poor rag picker picks it, he or she might incur this disease. And among animals, as we know, it can affect cattle and other farm animals like sheep and goat, and even elephants and hyena. Hyena has been affected recently in Chhattisgarh. And of course, humans are affected. It's a notifiable disease in India, human anthrax. And in India, Jharkhand and Odisha report the most number of cases. Maximum number of cases are reported by Jharkhand and Odisha from both cattle as well as human cases. And clinically in humans, it's of four types: cutaneous anthrax, pulmonary anthrax, intestinal anthrax, systemic anthrax. And now a fifth one is being described like injection anthrax, where people are using IV drug abuse and that material may contain some unsterile soil or some Bacillus anthracis spores, and thereby it causes very rapid anthrax and high fatality called injection anthrax. Now, you all know that before studying the One Health approach, one has to learn the epidemiology, clinical feature, and pathogenesis of anthrax. It is an infectious and often fatal disease caused by the gram-positive aerobic sporulating bacterium Bacillus anthracis. So every word is important. It is gram-positive, it is strictly aerobic, and it bears spores. Those spores are not bulging, the non-bulging spores. Please note that the anaerobic gram-positive rods like Clostridium also bear spore, but they are bulging spores and they cause other spectrum of diseases. Bacillus anthracis occurs naturally in soil and affects domestic and wild animals. It is a zoonotic disease infecting people if they come in contact with the infected animals or contaminated animal products. Spores of the bacterium are found in soil and water. So these spores, so that means we can be infected by contaminated soil, contaminated water, by aerosol route, respiratory route, or even by ingestion of the unsterile animal products. Now, if we take the worldwide figures, approximately 63.8 million pastoralists and livestock holders and 1.1 billion livestock animals are estimated to be at risk. So it is risky for the animals, for the farmers, and for the veterinary workers, as well as for the microbiologists. And annual human cases are 20,000 to 1 lakh, taking the world figures per year. Out of these, majority of cases are reported from India. So India alone reports, I think, around 80 to 85% or more. Apart from that, other countries are also involved like Pakistan, Iran, Central Africa, South America, and Russia. So these regions contribute the maximum number of anthrax cases in the world. And it is one of the top 10 diseases reported in India and one of the major causes of deaths in livestock with a very high fatality rate. In fact, in case of cow or goat or sheep, if there is anthrax, you really cannot save that animal, and it does create some huge financial losses for the farmer or the person who is rearing that cow or goat, and it has got some health risk also. It is one its ancestors form spores. So after the death of the infected host, while in the body of the infected host, it is a vegetative cell, it actively multiplies. The spore germinates to form the toxins. Toxins are produced. Three different toxins are produced, and apart from that, it multiplies very fast and infects many organs once it gains entry into the systemic circulation. And it leads to rapid death in the animals. And just before the animal's death, there is some bleeding from the natural orifices. There is no rigor mortis or delayed rigor mortis. So these things occur. The spores can remain dormant for many years in soil and begin to grow and secrete toxins after gaining entry into the susceptible host. So after being released into the soil, it can remain for many years. And moreover, as the animal dies, there is bleeding from the natural orifices, and that blood can contain Bacillus anthracis and its spores, so it naturally spreads to the environment and the other susceptible animals. In the 2001 US bioterrorism attack, we all know the Pentagon attack and the White House attack. In both the cases, the in the postcard or mail, the Bacillus anthracis spores were sent, and they were sent in a perfumed post so that everybody smells it and inhales it. And there were 11 human cases, 11 confirmed human anthrax cases there, and 5 deaths. So it has got almost 50% mortality there, and the mortality is anywhere between 20 to 60%. So if we see the picture carefully, the animal grazes and picks up the Bacillus anthracis spores from the soil. That is why grazing is not recommended nowadays, not only for anthrax, for other diseases like the entamoeba, giardia, or oocyst, or even other diseases. The animals, while grazing, can pick up different diseases, and then the animal dies, and again the Bacillus anthracis is released in the soil, and then it can infect the other hosts. In livestock dependent communities, survival is closely linked to the health of the animals. According to some reports, anthrax remains a severely underreported disease in Africa, Asia, and South America, where humans frequently butcher and eat animals infected with Bacillus anthracis. And there is no particular rule or regulation. Like I worked in a place previous to this, and there was a Mushahari colony nearby. We all know the Mushahari people. They are somewhat aggressive kind of people, and so they are economically poor and they live in a poor hygienic and sanitary conditions. And whenever their pet animal dies, like cow or pig or something, they just butcher the animals and just they just nominally they burn their flesh and eat their carcass, and like these things occur. And though they are at high risk of having these diseases. And in all livestock dependent communities, survival is closely linked to the health of the animals. When the animal is sick, people take time to dispose the animal. So sometimes there is a confusion like whether to use this precious resource or not. So people are using the animal skin, the animal's hooves, or the animal's horns, and putting the community at risk of anthrax exposure thereof. And in wildlife also, it is of great neglect. We do not really have no record that how many wildlife anthrax cases are occurring in the bisons or wild cows or wild horses. We do not know. Now, where do we get anthrax? It is mainly found in herbivores and domestic livestock, with certain spillovers in humans, with exposure through handling of sick animals and consumption of contaminated animal products. Economically, it inflicts a lot of loss on farmers who rear livestock. I need not emphasize it again. And there are four main types of anthrax, as I have told. So, what is the situation in India particularly? It is an endemic country. It has got the largest livestock population in the world. We have got the largest livestock population in the world. We top the world in case of beef export, and it is an endemic country for anthrax due to a large and unsafe population of livestock, leading to the outbreaks of human cases in certain parts. We do not really care most of the times whether the animals or the livestock animals are vaccinated against anthrax or not, whether we should not allow them to graze in the open fields. But in many of the cases, or most of the cases, we fail to regulate it, and grazing is taking place. And in many states of India, anthrax is enzootic. That means endemic in animals. The term used is enzootic. And those states are Andhra Pradesh, Jammu Kashmir, Tamil Nadu, Odisha, and Karnataka, as well as Jharkhand also. And in Karnataka, recently, in the last 4 or 5 years, many outbreaks have taken place. And if you see this figure, this bar chart shows only in Karnataka over the years, maximum number of cases you see are occurring in the field in the months of June to October. So it just coincides with the brief spurt of rainfall after the end of summer. That is the peak time for spreading of the anthrax spores in the environment, and the animals die, they bleed, and they again spread the spores all over the places. And so they all the animals at risk of having anthrax, including human beings. The anthrax cases in Odisha have been reported from the villages this year, just 2 months back, from the villages of Tentuligoda, Gulimusa, and Dashwantpur. So these are tribal dominated districts. And in these cases, in both Odisha and Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, these three states, the tribal people are less dependent on agriculture or plant produce. And they're more dependent on gaming or poaching or these wild animals or cattle. So one person died in these three areas, while the other 11 were under treatment, but in a stable condition. So they were fortunate enough to get diagnosed and treated in time. So that saves lives. And anthrax is a major but neglected zoonotic disease in public health concern in India, with Odisha state alone contributing a major chunk of the disease burden. So if you focus on this green part, this is the Odisha state. And within this green portion, there is a pink area that is the Koraput district. It is dominated by the tribal population who do not usually report the animal cases of suspected anthrax, and who habitually can remove the carcass and eat the carcass and do not usually dispose or report the animal deaths. So the real burden of anthrax in India, as Ujjwala madam was also telling, it is underestimated precisely because a significant number of cases will go unreported, and only a portion of human cases are seeking medical care. So it's not that everybody is coming for medical care. So out of the 30 Odisha districts, only 14 have seen anthrax with many cases. And now in the Koraput district, that same district I was focusing on. So out of 30 Odisha districts, 14 are always more or less reporting the anthrax cases. And tribal people here are dependent more on animals and consume carcass or meat, putting them at risk. So what happens after these pet or wild animal or sylvatic animals' deaths? The sporulation occurs due to change in the partial pressure of carbon dioxide that occurs after release from the carcass. So from the carcass, the bacteria is released through natural orifices through bleeding and or by rupture of the cutaneous lesions. And thereby there is a change in the partial pressure of carbon dioxide. The animal stops breathing, it is dead. So the carbon dioxide pressure increases, and which induces sporulation in this bacterium. And these spores germinate into the vegetative form and replicate in the gut of mammalian hosts following next accidental ingestion. An interesting thing is that these spores are viable for a long period of time in the environment. And when the animals succumb to the infection, they contaminate the environment and thereby continue the infection cycle. There is additional dissemination in the environment by the different types of flies, which act as mechanical vectors like Caliphorid or Tabanid flies. So these, and again, scavengers also like the crows and the vulture. And at this point of time, I'd like to mention an important point regarding vultures, that they are becoming extinct or they are becoming rarer now. And that is harmful for these cases for the public health concern as far as anthrax is concerned. Another fact is, this is also of one health importance, there are shared watering holes in the jungle or peri-urban area or sylvatic areas, which can facilitate spore aggregation and seasonal outbreaks. Now, what are these? These are natural small ponds or watering means collections of water where all the animals come and lick. The animals have a habit of drinking small amount of water, so they lick the water from these areas. And so the infected animal of, say, cow or goat or wild animal has got anthrax, and here that animal has licked the water from that holes. And then again, another natural means uninfected animal comes, and then these water bodies can act as a storehouse or harbinger of these pathogens. So habitat loss, particularly over long period of time, can substantially alter the abundance, richness, and movement pattern of the wildlife species that occupy the transitional spaces or ecotones. So this ecotone is the typical space which an animal occupies within a particular jungle or in a particular geographical area. But what's happening now, there is continuous deforestation since people want farmland, they're short of farmland, they want more and more cities are coming up, more and more jungles are being cleared to create some factories. and some apartments and flats. So, but thereby the agricultural zone is shrinking, the jungle space is shrinking. So, more and more wild animals are coming in contact with the farm animal or pet animals. More and more cases are coming in contact with the humans also. So, this also, this ecotone, this loss of ecotone or habitat has also got a bearing on the increased number of anthrax cases. It has been also shown that soil contaminated by anthrax infected carcass can promote grasses which are favored by the grazing herbivores. This is a very interesting thing, maybe due to some nitrogen fixation or some biochemical changes. The soil which has a lot of anthrax spores is rich in some particular nutrients or some particular nitrogenous compounds which favor the growth of some particular grasses which are favored by again those grazing animals. So if you see this picture carefully, this emphasizes the same thing. The animal grazes from the grasses. The animal, when dies of anthrax, again releases the spores in the soil, and it gets mixed with the humus and in the landscape, and thereby it undergoes several changes, and it favors the growth of that type of grasses which are again ingested by the grazing animals. There are some large herbivores like elephants, which are likely to be epidemiologically very, very important because a larger mass present for a longer time has the potential to contaminate more of the environment with spores. Like in Northeast India, like in Assam, Manipur, and some other states, there are recently a lot of animal cases of anthrax in elephants. So these wild elephants or even the peri-urban elephants, they die, and they, because of the large mass, when they die they bleed from their orifices, and their carcasses are being destroyed or decomposed or taken off, and thereby they infect a very huge area of soil, or the sometimes it happens so that the cattle or the animal dries upstream of a river in the jungle or tribal area or in a hilly area, and the river water carries the spores, and which are consumed downstream by the animals or even human beings or tribal populations or the indigenous population living there. So thereby also some very important cases of gastrointestinal anthrax has been noted. Especially this has been found in the Simdega area of Jharkhand recently, I think about 10 years ago, if I'm not very wrong. And people from RIMS Ranchi did isolate this bacterium from these areas, and there was a means it was did not spread much. Hence, these sort of animals act as the sentinel animals because they indicate the first means the first spread of the anthrax in the locality due to their death. Even the carcasses of small animals are cleared promptly in the jungle areas. People do not usually bury those animals or report the animal deaths. It is to be remembered here that some animals really have a very less fatality from anthrax, like dogs. Dogs have very less fatality even if they suffer from anthrax. And this is some the why this occurs is not very clearly known. And while global attention is currently focused on the WHO priority list of pathogens or blueprint list of priority diseases, which includes Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever, Ebola, Marburg, Lassa fever among the Erinaviridae, Middle East respiratory syndrome, MERS coronavirus due to its high mortality, and Rift Valley fever, Nipah virus. Several outbreaks had occurred few years back. In several cases were seen in Kerala, and before that in West Bengal. So it has got a very high mortality also from fruit bats. But apart from that, nobody really has paid so that much importance to anthrax as was due to it. And there are other neglected zoonoses which also needs attention. And the first example of those neglected zoonoses which we are not paying attention to is anthrax. Moving on to the agent, this will interest our veterinary microbiologists and also the medical microbiologists a lot. The bacterium is strictly aerobic, and it's a gram-positive spore-bearing rod and has got a polypeptide or proteinaceous capsule. This is also a peculiarity because all the other bacteria have a sugary or polysaccharide capsule. This polypeptide capsule is made up of D-glutamate. So if you see carefully, this bacterium is gram-positive, and the unstained central or subterminal part is the spore. The bacilli are arranged in chains, and individual bacilli have got a small boxcar appearance. That if you see a small sedan or SUV from the top, and the roof part of the sedan is the spore. So that is the appearance of the Bacillus anthracis bacterium. In the last stage, the animals infected by the anthrax bacillus, animals bleed from the mouth, as I have told, and this helps in the spread of the infection. It is a group A bioterrorism agent because infectious dose is very small. It is not easily inactivated by extreme of temperature or humidity. So, what are the clinical features of anthrax in animals, and then in human? Obviously, I'll discuss. So in the skin or cutaneous cases, a typical lesion, which is called eschar, an elevated lesion with a central brach necrotic area, develops. But initially develops as a papule with some itching. And some cutaneous anthrax is also called the Hyde-Porter's disease in humans. Pulmonary anthrax in man is called a Wool-Sorter's disease. So what do we see in animals? See, it's almost fatal in all animals except dogs, and sudden death occurs after the fever. So there is a fever, and then there may occur some depression and some convulsions, and then there is a sudden death, and there may be swelling of the genitalia or bloody diarrhea, and swelling of the neck area. And at the time of death, there is bleeding from the natural orifices like mouth, nostrils, anus, and vagina. Why the bleeding occurs? Because there is some impairment or inhibition of the coagulation pathway by this anthrax bacillus or its toxins. And this animal has developed, in the lower picture, has got developed a rigor mortis, but it is often very much delayed in case of anthrax. And in the upper picture, the infected cow shows bleeding from its nostrils. It is soon going to die from anthrax. In humans, the fatality rate is 25 to 60%. So humans, the manifestations vary according to the route of exposure. The infections can be cutaneous or pulmonary or inhalational and septicemic or even injectional anthrax, which occurs due to the contaminated heroin use. Rarely, some rare cases of anthrax are seen, like oropharyngeal anthrax, and it's a palatal lesion with central necrotic ulcer on the tonsil also sometimes, or hard palate. And soft tissue swelling of the neck is very much seen, and cervical lymph nodes are enlarged. About one third of systemic disease is also complicated by anthrax meningitis, which has got a mortality rate of 92.3%. This picture shows the typical cutaneous eschar, the central necrotic elevated lesion. So while we are discussing the agent and the epidemiological aspects and the clinical features, we should also know a little bit about the pathogenesis, means why and how it is producing the disease. First important factor is a protective antigen or PA. It protects the bacterium and the toxins. The other toxins, it allows entry of the enzymatic components, edema factor and lethal factor into the host cell by the formation of a membrane spanning pore in the host cell. And the next important toxin is the edema factor, which leads to cutaneous and pulmonary and subcutaneous and tissue edema. It is the catalytic component of edema toxin. It's an adenylate cyclase and raises intracellular cyclic AMP levels, thereby causing the fluid accumulation. It can lead to fluid influx into the intestinal lumen, liver edema, tissue damage, and death. Lethal factor or lethal toxin is one of the most important toxins. It is a zinc-dependent metalloproteinase that inactivates the mitogen-activated protein kinases, MEKs, which actually deranges or disrupts the inflammatory pathways or the body's response to inflammation or infection, the cytokine movement, and thereby the body fails to mount an inflammatory or immune reaction or cytolytic reaction against the bacillus. Another important factor is the ability to multiply rapidly and the spore germination, which needs the right physicochemical conditions. Now, this is very important from One Health point of view. The pH should be more than 6 and the temperature should be more than 15 for the spore germination. So it will not multiply in very, very acidic soils. So maybe this is why it is not very commonly seen in the hilly areas where there are trees and herbs like tea, which acidify the soil by their humus. And this may be a factor behind the increased number of cases in the terai or foothill areas or in the jungle areas where the pH is conducive to spore germination. So in addition to large single chromosome, these virulence factors are encoded by the extra chromosomal plasmids PXO1 and PXO2. The PXO1 plasmid encodes the three anthrax exotoxin components, and PXO2 encodes the proteins that synthesize the poly D gamma glutamic acid capsule. This capsule, in turn, inhibits the phagocytosis by the macrophage. Actually, the bacillus employs the macrophage as a Trojan horse to move from one tissue to another and from tissue to blood. Because the macrophage just harbors the bacterium and is not able to kill the or engulf or phagocytose the bacterium. These macrophages are served as Trojan horse to carry them from peripheral sites to local lymph nodes where they germinate and become toxin-producing vegetative bacteria. So there is a rapid localized germination event once the spore enters through your nostrils or through your skin, indicating that bacteria overcome the innate immunity, which leads to systemic infection. This has been termed as a jailbreak mechanism. So there are two mechanisms. Earlier it was called Trojan horse. Nowadays it has been found that the jailbreak or local rapid multiplication is more important for the pathogenesis. So to contain the cases, we first have to detect it clinically. We have to suspect it. We have to monitor the early warning signal from sentinel animal deaths. And then we have to move to proper and prompt laboratory diagnosis. First of all, gram stain from the sample like sputum or lung biopsy or cutaneous ulcers or wound swabs, which shows non-bulging spore in the gram-positive bacilli, boxcar appearance. Capsule can be shown by the Fadyean reaction. The picture shows the Fadyean reaction. The light blue aggregation around the dark blue inner bacterium is the indication of the capsule. So these bacteria are different from the other bacillus species by their inability to move about. So they are non-motile. So they are non-hemolytic on blood agar. And they have a typical medusa head colonies, which are dry, flat, crumbled colonies. Even all other bacillus species like Bacillus cereus also produces dry, flat colonies, but the crumbling and the corrugated appearance is very typical of the medusa head colony in Bacillus anthracis. The picture I'll be showing in the next slide. And the serology, if you go, all the veterinarians know this very well. Axpol is thermoprecipitation technique, whereby we take the hyperimmune rabbit antisera and we take an extract of the or the mixture of the tissues, different tissues from the infected animal, which contains suspected antigen, and there is a precipitation reaction in the middle in the test tube. And but before that, all these samples should be processed in a biological safety cabinet type 3 because it is a category A bioterrorism agent. It should be given its due importance if we want to control it. What is Fadyean reaction? When a blood film containing anthrax bacilli is stained using polychrome methylene blue for a few seconds and observed under microscope, a purplish coat of amorphous material is seen around the blue stained bacillus. This amorphous purple material is the capsule. The capsule is usually polypeptide in nature, as I have told before. Note at this picture on the right-hand side, this is the typical crumbly, corrugated appearance of the medusa head colonies of Bacillus anthracis. Now, from other than this ascoril thermoprecipitation or the gram stain, we can do PCR and also direct fluorescent antibody test, which is very, very sensitive and specific. We just need to have the monoclonal antibody tagged with fluorescent compound, monoclonal antibody against Bacillus anthracis. And if the anthrax is present in the slide smear, and then we use the monoclonal antibody against it, and we observe it under UV microscope or fluorescent microscope, and then we be able to see the bacterium. Now, this culture and PCR are better than microscopy because microscopy often fails to find the bacterium because the sensitivity is low. Culture must be carried out in the biosafety level 2+ or level 3 lab, which are commonly lacking in the anthrax endemic area. Besides the higher cost associated with culture, there are some difficulties. Like we really cannot do the diagnostic test in the peripheral areas or in the hilly jungle areas. And moreover, if we go on to collect the sample and then transport it, the wound swab or the sputum or the animal's tissue, and by the time it reaches the laboratory, the spores are easily outcompeted by the other bacteria which also harbor the sputum or skin tissue, and thereby the sample will yield all the other bacteria except Bacillus anthracis. So these things have to be kept in mind. So people are relying on other modalities of diagnosis, like the chest X-ray for the pulmonary anthrax, suspected pulmonary anthrax. It typically shows bilateral shadows and widening of the mediastinum and pleural effusion. And for meningitis, we go for CT or contrast enhanced CT or MRI with contrast to document the meningeal enhancement, which is found in the meningitis, and identify the hemorrhagic parenchymal lesions, which is so very characteristic or typical of anthrax meningoencephalitis. Treatment is usually constituted by ciprofloxacin or doxycycline. In cutaneous anthrax, treatment has to be done for a minimum period of 7 to 10 days. Other drugs are also important, like penicillin, doxycycline, or ciprofloxacin. Empirical treatment can be done with fluoroquinolones or doxycycline. So, for prevention, a live spore-based vaccine, which was originally discovered by Stern in 1930s, which then replaced Pasteur's vaccine, is still modified and in use, and it is created with a marked reduction. It is credited with a marked reduction in the incidence of anthrax cases, but there is a risk of residual pathogenicity in the vaccine if the immunity goes down. And one should wear protective clothing, gloves, and mask while examining the sick animal. This is also a preventive measure. We should have all the PPE kit that is recommended for this outbreak investigation, including the PPE suit, the goggles, the headgear, the boots, the gloves, mask, everything. So nowadays, a modified vaccine called AVA or anthrax vaccine absorbed, it is used. Some people use a bovine anthrax vaccine derived from the live toxigenic non-encapsulated spore vaccine developed by Stern, and it consists of spores suspended in a diluent containing saponin and glycerin. But there is no human vaccine. Sufficient anthrax vaccine coverage in the domestic animals in the developed countries has been seen that it reduces greatly the disease incidence in both human and livestock animals. So now we are coming to the One Health aspect for control of anthrax. A joint monitoring system is needed, like the One Health strategy which is the most efficient and reliable means of addressing zoonotic disease like the anthrax in low-income country. First of all, there are some important points like the animal death in the wild and peri-urban area should be monitored and reported, which we often fail to do. Next, the cases should be diagnosed and treated early. Third, the veterinarian should detect the animal cases early, like the sentinel animals or early warning signals. Carcass should be managed and protected from the flies, as tabanid and californid flies can act as mechanical vectors. And continuous surveillance is essential. Actually, we need not add the word continuous before surveillance, because surveillance is itself a continuous process, and whereby we continuously monitor the situation and the animal deaths in the particular community which has reported anthrax cases earlier or which is vulnerable to anthrax. Anthrax spores can remain viable in soil for a long time, and it has been said as long as 100 years survival is seen, and hence anthrax cannot be eradicated. This we should remember. It cannot be eradicated. It can be mitigated or controlled or prevented. Destroying carcass by burying or incineration is costly, dangerous, and frozen, flooded, treeless, or rocky ground can make this virtually impossible. In the rocky areas, in the rocky terrain, or in the frozen areas, we cannot really destroy the carcass by burying. So these are important things. Consequently, carcasses are often left to rot by the people or are discarded into flooding rivers. This I was telling in the Simdega district of Jharkhand. This has been seen in the tribal areas. Many cases of gastrointestinal anthrax by the animal deaths upstream. Billions of Bacillus anthracis spores are released into soil and the environment as a result of these things. Furthermore, domestic animals are now dominate the global mammalian biomass on a shrinking range land. On one hand, we want increased livestock production due to our own benefit, and on the other hand, we are not allowing them enough habitat. We are destroying their spaces, and we are creating apartments and economic zones. So they are continuously coming in contact with us, and thereby this also increases the chances of human anthrax from animals. And furthermore, the dominance is leading to the high density of livestock in some region and persistent anthrax hotspots. So these hotspots, they remain as hotspots like that. Coordination is there, should be there between the veterinary department and animal husbandry, and for surveillance and livestock vaccination drive for all the cattle. Anthrax disease needs to be prevented with proper legislation of meat handling as well as effective immunization of animals. And one should this has got some political bearings also. And regulation of meat sale and good hygiene practices at the slaughterhouses. Whenever there is an anthrax area in the locality, this is similar to the bird flu outbreak in any area. We stop the butchering of, we stop the selling of meat in those areas. So the meat sale should be regulated in those areas also which are showing anthrax cases. And good hygiene practices slaughterhouse is very, very essential, not only preventing anthrax, but also for preventing other diseases like prion diseases. When an animal is meant for human consumption, it should undergo inspection before they are slaughtered and put on sale. Their age is very important, and their physical condition and health status is also very important. Behavioral change communication, BCC for anthrax prevention. All the village heads should educate the inhabitants with very important one line health education input, like not to consume raw meat. The head of the village can take the initiative in this matter. He should tell to cook it well before eating, and other if otherwise one is at risk of contracting anthrax, they should be explained to so that he explains better to the subjects. He should be provided with some IEC material in Hindi or in the vernacular language, or even if they understand English in those areas in English language. There are some other systems or the other things which should be important from the One Health viewpoint. We know in One Health there are three aspects: human health, animal health, and environmental health. So we should strengthen the healthcare system, human health, and surveillance system for early reporting of suspected cases of human and animal anthrax. Veterinary labs should have this biosafety level 3 and PCR facilities. So should have the so it should be also be present in the human labs by developing and implementing the One Health biosurveillance system. This system is very important. Establishment of an anthrax diagnosis facility of the state, operationalization of the standard operating procedures and outbreak response protocols for all stakeholders, provision of post-exposure prophylaxis of suspected contacts by the drugs I mentioned, and loss of natural scavengers like vultures may have an increased chances of anthrax. This is an important area because nowadays, due to some avian viruses or due to widespread use of diclofenac, there are almost no vultures to be seen. India was home to the maximum number of vulture species which acted as natural scavengers. What they did, they removed the bacillus spores by the scavenging or foraging on the animals. But when they are not there, the vultures are not there, the animals are rotting and bleeding and distributing continuously the bacillus anthracis in the environment. So this has also got a risk. So there are some other innovations like this animal body bags made from a heavy duty scalable plastic where the burning or burial is not feasible. One can put the carcass of the animals in this bag to prevent it from the vectoring flies. And these could be made available from Health Extension Office, stamped with a warning, suspect anthrax, do not touch or move. With the phone number of the public health and veterinary authorities and smartphone app QR code pasted on the top to record the automatic spatiotemporal data. Whenever one scans it, you get the information that somebody is monitoring this and putting the dead animal into this animal body bag, which is nothing but a strong plastic bag. Another strategy that we can follow from the One Health viewpoint and also from the public health concern is the strategy of ring vaccination during outbreaks. Ring vaccination means when an index animal is showing some signs and symptoms of anthrax, all the animals which are in closest contact or vicinity of that animal should be administered this anthrax vaccine. This greatly limits the spread of the infection. Ring vaccination is a type of vaccine if a person is exposed to, even if in humans, vaccine for that virus given to others which are in close contact. Public health officials use it as a part of public health response to limit the spread of vaccine preventable diseases. And this has helped a lot in the eradication of smallpox in the first half of 1900s, and which ultimately led to the eradication of smallpox. And the ring vaccination was the initial successful strategy in this. The soil ecology has also has to be monitored. They survive best in the alkaline soil having high moisture and calcium. And the environmentalists can look into the soil aspects to minimize the chances of spore survival. Interstate cooperation is needed for better management of anthrax prevention and control, particularly in India. The maximum number of cases are reported by 3 or 4 states like Odisha, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and Karnataka. And if they cooperate with or coordinate with each other and share data with each other and share their control measures, also their techniques with each other, this will help in better control. And some soil factors like alkaline pH, as I have told, temperature over 15.5 provide environmental conditions suitable for the spore germination. Collecting data is essential in the geographic conditions in the jungle area, the cattle movement, the rivers, rivulets. By the data collection system to collect these data is the geographic information system or remote systems, remote sensing with the help of satellites and other monitoring systems. It is possible to predict the incidence and anthrax and prevalence of anthrax. This mapping can be done on a real-time basis to categorize the geographical limits of the district into a red area or the action area, yellow area, and the green or monitor zones during and following an outbreak. Lastly, but not the least, we should focus on capacity building. We should put up the diagnostic facilities or the control facilities, IEC, BCC activity and surveillance system. IEC is information, education, communication by the help of TV shows, newspaper releases, and the pamphlets and posters which we can use. One of the most important things which is often overlooked is increased investment. We should deploy enough money into the One Health system or One Health sector, which is an approach which promotes communication between the different disciplines to achieve optimal health of people, animal, and the environment. And this is the need of the hour. I need not emphasize it. This is important for human medicine practitioners, for veterinarians, for environmentalists, everybody. Hence, the human medicine, veterinary medicine, and environmental science must cross-talk with each other for successful control of anthrax. Also, by promoting strong collaboration among the relevant sectors, the One Health approach strengthens the disease surveillance system, and thereby the cases can be controlled by sharing the data with all stakeholders, diagnostic laboratory systems, and the network. Generally, the One Health approach supports the international health security through the effective multi-sectoral collaboration, coordination, and information communication. So, as this picture shows, we will do communication, collaboration, coordination, capacity building, and all of these go into making the successful One Health approach. Take home message is anthrax is a deadly but neglected zoonosis, and diagnosis and treatment needs special care. And a well coordinated One Health approach is advisable for proper detection and control. This is the screen grab I have taken from NCDC website, whereby they have shared a poster in Hindi language that anthrax एक संक्रामक बीमारी है, इसके बचाव के लिए कर ले तैयारी. They have listed all these things that one can do. These sort of posters can be shared in the peripheral areas, village areas, so that everybody gets to know something about anthrax, that what can happen if we don't handle or manage our pet animals or their carcass, or we do not report their deaths, and what can happen, these things.